The ship was quiet, unnervingly quiet. The only sound was the hum of its engines deep beneath the metal floors. The air smelled sterile, almost too clean, like a hospital room or a laboratory. The walls were smooth and dark, glowing faintly with strange symbols the medic could not understand. She was alone. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she took in her surroundings. This was no ordinary place. The cold metallic walls seemed to stretch endlessly around her, closing in like the jaws of a trap. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, but there was only confusion. The last thing she remembered was the explosion. Then, everything went black. Now she was here, in a cold, silent room. The smell of strange chemicals was thick in the air, and the dull hum of the ship filled her ears. Her body ached, her head throbbed with a dull pain, and her muscles felt weak. Her hands were still bound by thick cuffs that seemed to be made of some alien material, stronger than anything she had encountered before. No matter how much she pulled or twisted, the cuffs wouldn't budge. She had no idea where here was. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a soft click followed by the slow hiss of a door opening. The medic tensed, her heart racing. She quickly pushed herself against the cold wall, trying to blend into the shadows. Every instinct she had screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. She was trapped. Through the open doorway, several tall figures stepped into the room. They were alien, their bodies long and thin, covered in smooth greenish skin. Their eyes were large, dark, and unblinking, and their faces were expressionless. The medic could tell they weren't human, but there was something about them, something in the way they moved that made her think they were more than just alien creatures. These were soldiers or captors. She wasn't sure which. She swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. She couldn't let them know she was scared. She had to stay calm. "Human," one of the aliens said in a strange, clipped tone. The voice was deep, rough, and filled with a coldness that made her shiver. "You are a prisoner of the Galactic Empire now." The medic couldn't help it. She clenched her fists. "Galactic Empire," she repeated. "What are you talking about? Where am I?" The alien's eyes glowed slightly brighter as it stepped forward. It didn't answer her question directly. Instead, it gestured to the room, its long, bony fingers pointing to the far corner where a metal bench sat. "Rest," the alien said, its voice almost like a command. She glared at the creature, but didn't argue. It was clear she had no choice. The cuffs on her wrists made any chance of resistance seem pointless. For now, she had to wait, observe, and think. The aliens turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door open. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The medic sat on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring into the dark corners of the room. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of where she was, who these aliens were, and why they had taken her. Her training kicked in then. Stay alert. Stay alive. She shifted, her body stiff and sore, and her gaze landed on the metal bench across the room. There was nothing in the room except for the bench and a small, round window high above the wall. She walked over to it, feeling the cold surface under her fingers. The window was high enough to keep her from seeing much, but she could tell there was movement outside. She didn't know if it was the stars or something else. The soft click of the door opening interrupted her thoughts again. This time, she didn't even flinch. She turned her head just slightly, her eyes narrowing at the figure that stepped through the doorway. The alien was different from the others. It was taller, more powerful looking. Its eyes glowed a brighter shade of green, and its skin was a darker shade of gray. This one didn't say anything at first, just looked at her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "You are not like the others." The alien spoke slowly, its voice deep and menacing. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied the creature carefully. Something about it felt different, more dangerous. It was not just a soldier. She could see it in the way it carried itself. This one was important, maybe even a leader of some kind. The medic took a breath. She had to be smart. Every word mattered now. She had to find out what was going on without giving too much away. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady, but laced with the subtle threat she had learned to use in the most dangerous situations. The alien's lips curled up slightly in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach its eyes. "We want nothing from you," it said, its tone cold. "You will do what you are told. You will serve us, or you will die." The medic narrowed her eyes, weighing her options. She wasn't scared. She wasn't going to be anyone's servant. She would find a way out. That was the first rule of survival. "Then I choose death," she said softly, more to herself than to the alien. But it was clear to her now that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. She had no idea what these aliens had planned, but one thing was for sure: she wasn't going down without a fight. The alien didn't respond. It only nodded once, its cold, emotionless eyes still locked onto hers before it turned and left the room. The door hissed shut behind it. The medic sat down on the floor again, her mind working quickly. She couldn't stay here. Not for long. She needed a plan. She needed to understand what she was up against, and she needed to find a way out before it was too late. Her heart was racing, but her face was calm. She would survive. The silence in the cold, metallic room was suffocating. Time seemed to stretch and warp, becoming indistinguishable as the medic sat against the wall, her mind racing through possible plans of escape. The alien's words echoed in her mind. "You will serve us, or you will die." She wasn't sure which option seemed worse. She had been in tough situations before, but nothing quite like this. She had no idea where she was or what they wanted from her. But she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to go down quietly. Her focus was momentarily broken by the soft, rhythmic hum of the ship's engine deep beneath her feet. It was oddly soothing, in a way, but it also reminded her that she was trapped, alone in a place she couldn't begin to understand. The door slid open again, startling her. She was on her feet instantly, her body tense, every muscle prepared to act. But the alien who entered the room wasn't the same one she had seen before. This one was massive. Its body was hunched, covered in dark scales, and its eyes glowed a fiery red. It was like nothing she had seen in her medical career, not even in the worst stories from her training. She took a step back instinctively, feeling the sharp edge of the wall against her back. There was no room to retreat, no place to hide. This creature was towering, its claws gleaming in the dim light, and its fangs, razor sharp. It was a beast, a predator. For a moment, she simply stared at it, her heart hammering in her chest. The creature was like an animal, but its eyes held a flicker of intelligence, an awareness of her presence, of her every movement. It was a strange mix of both the terrifying and the uncanny. The door slid shut behind it, and she was left alone with the beast. Her pulse raced in her ears as she watched the creature pace in slow, deliberate steps, its claws scraping against the cold floor. Its every movement radiated danger, an untamed force waiting to strike. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. Then, the creature stopped. It stood there, staring at her, its glowing red eyes fixated on her every movement. A low growl rumbled from its chest, vibrating the air between them. The growl was deep, like thunder, and for a brief moment, the medic wondered if it had already decided she wasn't worth the trouble of keeping alive. Without warning, the creature lunged, moving faster than she thought possible. Instinctively, she threw herself to the side, narrowly avoiding its sharp claws as they scraped through the air where she had just been. She could feel the wind from its strike, the raw power behind it, and she knew this creature wasn't just a guard. It was a weapon. Her mind raced as she quickly rolled to her feet, positioning herself against the wall, trying to make sense of the situation. What did they want with her? Why had they placed her in this cell? And more importantly, why had they left her with this beast? The creature circled her, its eyes never leaving hers. It was toying with her, slowly closing the distance. It was a predator, and she was its prey. But she wasn't going to be caught that easily. She scanned the room quickly, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. The metal bench from earlier was still there, but it was too far to reach. The walls were smooth, offering no handholds or places to climb. There was no way out. But there had to be something. Think, think, think. The creature lunged again, this time quicker, its claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. But she was ready this time. At the last second, she ducked, feeling the air rush past her as the claws missed by inches. She grabbed a piece of debris from the floor, a sharp metal fragment from the ship's wreckage, and held it out in front of her like a makeshift weapon. The beast stopped in its tracks, its red eyes narrowing at the sight of the sharp object in her hand. It was almost as if it could understand her challenge. It growled again, this time more menacingly, but didn't move forward. It was sizing her up, just like a hunter would with its prey. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but she kept the shard steady, her grip tight. She wasn't going down without a fight. No matter how strong or deadly this creature was, she wasn't going to let it defeat her. Not like this. The creature suddenly made a noise, something between a growl and a bark. It was almost as if it was laughing at her. It seemed to sense her fear, but it also seemed to admire her determination. Its eyes flicked to the door, and for a brief moment, the medic thought it might leave. But then, without warning, it charged again. This time, she was ready. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's deadly strike as it crashed into the wall where she had just been standing. The impact sent a shockwave through the room, shaking the walls and rattling her bones. She barely had time to recover before the creature was back on her, but she wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. With all the strength she could muster, she swung the metal shard at the creature's side, landing a sharp blow against its tough hide. It didn't penetrate, but it made the creature pause, a hiss escaping from its mouth. She didn't wait for it to recover. As it staggered back, she made a break for it, running toward the far corner of the room, hoping there might be some way out, some hidden passage. But as her hand reached the door panel, the creature was already on her, its claws scraping against the floor. The medic's heart pounded in her chest. She had to act fast. She was on the edge now, on the edge of survival. And there was only one way out. Fight. The beast lunged again. This time, she didn't dodge. She fought back. The room shook with the violent energy of their battle. The medic's heart raced in her chest, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, but she knew that wouldn't save her. She had no choice. She had to face the beast head-on. The stakes were higher than ever, and if she faltered, it would be the end. With a swift movement, the beast swung its claws in an arc, aiming directly for her head. The sharp tips glinted in the dim light, moving with terrifying speed. She ducked just in time, feeling the air rushed by as the claws missed by inches. Her feet slipped slightly on the cold floor, but she recovered, spinning around and planting her feet firmly on the ground. Every muscle in her body screamed, but she pushed forward, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She gripped the metal shard tighter, her knuckles white. There was no turning back now. The creature growled, low and guttural, as it lunged at her again. It was relentless, its movements fluid and deadly. The medic raised her makeshift weapon, thrusting it forward in an attempt to ward the beast off, but it was too fast. The beast swiped at her, its claws scraping against her arm as she barely managed to block the blow. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't flinch. The cut wasn't deep, but the burn of it was enough to make her realize how close she had come to losing her life. The creature stepped back, watching her with an unnerving intensity. Its red eyes seemed to study her, as if it were trying to understand why she wasn't crumbling under its power. Its breath came in heavy rasps, and for a moment, the medic dared to wonder if it was tiring. She hadn't expected it to pause, to give her this moment of reprieve. But she wasn't foolish. She knew the creature wasn't stopping. It was just waiting for the right moment to strike again, to finish what it had started. And when it came, she had to be ready. Suddenly, the beast roared, a sound that reverberated through the entire cell. It was loud, deafening, and for a moment, the medic thought her eardrums might burst from the sheer force of it. She covered her ears, but the roar was not just a sound. It was a signal. It wasn't just a creature in front of her. It was a weapon, a force of nature. And it wasn't alone. The floor trembled as the sound of more heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway outside the cell. Another alien, this one even larger than the first, appeared at the door, peering in through the narrow slit. The medic's stomach twisted in dread as the new creature's eyes locked onto her. The two beasts exchanged a brief look, a silent understanding passing between them. The first one growled lowly and backed off, retreating slightly into the shadows of the room. The second beast advanced, its eyes glowing even brighter than its counterparts. This new creature was built like a mountain. Its massive frame filled the doorway, and it exuded an aura of dominance. It didn't even need to speak. Its presence alone was enough to make the medic's skin crawl. With both creatures in the room now, she was outmatched. Her heart sank. There was no way she could take on two of them. No way she could fight her way out. And yet, there was no choice. Her body might be weak from the pain of her wounds, but her will was stronger. She would not die here. The second beast charged, moving faster than its massive frame should have allowed. It swung a massive arm toward her, and she barely managed to sidestep the blow, the air humming with the force of it. She stumbled, her foot slipping on the slick floor, and before she could regain her balance, the first creature pounced, its claws raised for another deadly swipe. The medic rolled to the side, narrowly missing the claws that gouged into the floor where she had been. She scrambled to her feet, her body screaming in protest as she moved. She couldn't keep this up forever. Her muscles burned, her mind was fraying at the edges, and the blood from her wound was starting to stain her clothes. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. As the second creature lunged again, she did the only thing she could think of. She dropped to the ground and slid beneath its legs, narrowly escaping its crushing claws. She was close now, closer than she had been to getting out of this alive. She felt the sharp scrape of its claws against the metal as she slid beneath it, and she forced herself to keep moving. Her eyes darted around the room for anything she could use, anything to her advantage. The creature behind her snarled, turning to face her, but she was already on her feet, running for the far corner of the room. Her feet pounded against the cold floor as she sprinted, ignoring the blood that dripped from her arm. There was only one goal now, survival. She reached the far wall and began to climb. She had no idea how high it was, no idea if it would even hold, but it was the only hope she had left. Her hands gripped the smooth surface, finding small ridges and cracks to hold onto as she pulled herself upward. The creatures were close behind, but she didn't dare look back. She couldn't afford to lose focus now. Her breathing was ragged, her muscles aching, but she climbed faster, pushing through the exhaustion. She was almost there, just a little higher. The beast behind her let out an angry snarl, but it couldn't reach her. Not yet. She could hear the heavy thud of their footsteps below, the growls and howls growing louder as they closed in. Time was running out, but she was determined to get away. She had come this far, and there was no way she was going to let them win now. With one final push, she reached the top of the wall. She looked around desperately for an exit, a way to escape, but there was none. She was trapped. But then, in the distance, something caught her eye. A small, narrow vent, just big enough for her to squeeze through. It was her only chance. The medic's heart raced as she gazed at the small vent, barely big enough for her to fit through. It was the only hope she had left. Her fingers tingled with desperation, and her mind screamed for action. There was no time to hesitate, no time to second-guess herself. If she didn't move now, the beasts would close in, and this would be the end. Her muscles screamed as she crawled toward the vent, each movement a struggle against the pain and exhaustion that had taken hold of her. The first creature, still growling from below, was already making its way toward her. The second beast, a massive presence looming behind, roared in frustration. They were closing in. The medic didn't dare to look back. She just kept moving, faster than she thought possible, her body moving purely on instinct. She reached the vent and threw herself onto the floor in front of it. Her hands were slick with sweat and blood, but she ignored the pain. With all the strength she could muster, she forced the vent cover open, its metal edges screeching in protest. The sound echoed through the chamber, and for a brief moment, she thought she had given herself away. But the creatures didn't seem to notice. She took a deep breath and squeezed her body into the vent, her clothes tearing as she forced herself through the narrow opening. The moment her body cleared the opening, she felt the cool air of the vent system wash over her, a stark contrast to the heat of the cell. But she didn't stop to appreciate it. She had no time. The beasts were still after her, and they wouldn't stop until they had caught her. The narrow tunnel stretched out before her, dimly lit by flickering lights overhead. It was a claustrophobic space, and every movement she made caused the walls to press in around her. She could feel the metal grate beneath her fingertips, the sharp edges biting into her skin. But there was no turning back now. She had to keep going. Behind her, the beasts' howls grew louder as they realized what she had done. The medic's heart pounded in her chest, and her breath came in short, ragged gasps. She had managed to escape the cell, but she was far from safe. The vent system could lead anywhere or nowhere, but at least it was a chance, and it was better than staying trapped with the beasts. She crawled through the dark tunnel, her mind racing as she tried to think of her next move. She had to get to the ship's control room. That was the only way she could turn the tables, the only way she could get the upper hand. But how? How could she do that without a weapon, without any real power? The thought weighed heavily on her. The aliens had locked her in with their deadliest creatures for a reason. They didn't see her as a threat, but that was about to change. She was a medic, trained to survive in the harshest conditions. She might not have the strength or the size of the creatures, but she had something they didn't: intelligence, and she was going to use it. As she crawled through the vent, her mind worked overtime. She replayed the encounter with the beasts in her head, analyzing every movement, every sound. They were powerful, yes, but they were predictable. They relied on brute force, on intimidation. She, on the other hand, had learned to think on her feet, to adapt quickly to any situation. The vent tunnel twisted and turned, and she had no idea where it would lead her. She tried to stay calm, to keep her mind focused, but it was difficult. The beasts were still behind her, and she could hear their heavy footsteps as they hunted through the ship, trying to find her. Their growls echoed in the tunnels, and the medic quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She rounded a corner and came to a sudden stop. The tunnel ahead of her was blocked. A metal grate had fallen across the path, and she couldn't see any way around it. She cursed under her breath, her mind racing for a solution. She was trapped again. The beasts were closing in, and she had nowhere to go. But then a thought crossed her mind. There was a maintenance hatch. She remembered it from her time on the ship. It was a small, hidden opening that could lead to the lower levels, if she could reach it. She had to get to it. That was her only hope. With renewed determination, she backed up and turned in the opposite direction, retracing her steps through the vent system. The beasts' growls were louder now, closer. She could hear the thud of their massive feet, and she knew they were getting near. She had to hurry. The maintenance hatch was just ahead. She could see the faint outline of it in the dark tunnel. She reached it, her hands trembling as she tried to pry the hatch open. It was rusted, old, and difficult to budge. But she didn't stop. She pulled with everything she had, and finally, the hatch gave way with a creak of metal. She quickly crawled through, not daring to look back. On the other side of the hatch, the tunnel was even darker, and the air smelled stale and damp. But it was a way forward. She didn't care what it smelled like. She just had to keep moving. The medic's mind raced as she navigated through the dim tunnels, each step taking her further away from the beasts and closer to her goal. She had no idea what she would find ahead, but she was ready for whatever came next. She would not let fear control her. She had a mission to complete, and she would not fail. As the last of the light from the vent faded behind her, she heard something unexpected. The sound of footsteps, not the heavy thuds of the beasts, but the light, cautious steps of someone, or something else. The medic paused, holding her breath. Who was that? Could it be another alien, or was it something far more dangerous? Her heart skipped a beat. The chase wasn't over yet. The medic moved swiftly, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the thick metal floor beneath her boots. The corridors of the alien ship seemed endless, twisting and turning in unnatural angles, defying her sense of direction. Each corner she turned revealed more of the vast, unfamiliar vessel, its walls lined with strange glowing symbols, its rooms filled with unfamiliar technology that hummed softly, as if alive. Her mind raced. She had the mysterious device now, but what was it? And why had the strange figure given it to her? Was it a trap? She couldn't afford to be naive. The aliens who had imprisoned her were ruthless, and she knew they wouldn't let her go easily. But this was different. This felt different. There was something about the device, something about the figure, that told her there was more at play here than a simple escape attempt. Her eyes narrowed as she approached a set of double doors at the end of the corridor. They were unlike anything she had seen before, large, metallic, and adorned with intricate alien designs. The doors pulsed with a soft blue light, similar to the device she now carried. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing against the cold metal, before she pushed forward, the doors sliding open with a hiss. Inside was a massive room, unlike anything she could have imagined. The walls were lined with large monitors, each displaying alien language and strange symbols. At the center of the room stood a large circular table, surrounded by several alien figures. They were unlike the creatures she had seen before. These beings were tall, regal, and their bodies shimmered with a faint ethereal glow. They seemed to be in deep conversation, their voices low and unsettling. The medic froze, her heart skipping a beat. She had stumbled upon the command center of the ship, the heart of the alien operation. Her mind screamed for her to turn around and flee, but her feet refused to move. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. If she could gather information here, if she could find a way to understand their plans, she might just have a chance to escape, or even to turn the tide in her favor. Before she could decide on her next move, one of the aliens turned toward her, its glowing eyes locking onto hers. It was the same figure that had appeared in the tunnel earlier, the one who had given her the device. For a moment, there was silence. The medic's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the moment sinking in. She had been discovered, but there was no turning back now. She had to act. The alien's lips parted, revealing sharp, glistening teeth. Its voice was smooth, almost melodic, as it spoke in a language she couldn't understand. The words seemed to flow from its mouth like a song, but the meaning was lost on her. For a brief moment, the alien's gaze flicked to the device in her hand. The medic's grip tightened around it instinctively. Whatever this was, it was important. The alien's eyes narrowed, and then, to her surprise, it switched to a language she could understand, barely. "You are not supposed to be here," it said, its voice cold and commanding. "This place is not meant for your kind." The medic didn't flinch. She had learned long ago not to show fear. Instead, she stood tall and met the alien's gaze, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm not your prisoner anymore," she replied, her words firm. "I want answers." The alien's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and something darker, something calculating. "You seek answers, human." The alien tilted its head, almost curiously. "You have no idea what you're asking for." A strange feeling washed over the medic. This was not just a question of escape. It was something deeper, something more dangerous. The device, the figure in the shadows, the strange power this place held, it all seemed connected in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. "We all have our roles," the alien continued, its voice growing colder. "You may think you're here by chance, but we know why you're here. We know who you are." The medic felt her breath catch in her throat. How could they possibly know about her? She was just a medic, a human, a simple healer caught in the middle of something she couldn't control. Yet the alien's words seemed to carry weight, like a threat wrapped in a mystery. "You've been brought here for a reason," the alien said, its tone shifting to something more sinister. "And the path you walk now leads to more than you realize." The medic's mind spun. What did they mean? What path? Was she merely a pawn in a game she couldn't see? She needed more time to think, to process, but she couldn't afford to linger here for too long. "Let me go," she demanded, trying to sound confident, though her heart was racing. "I'm not your enemy." The alien smiled, its teeth sharp and unsettling. "You will understand soon enough," it said, and with a swift movement, it gestured toward the others in the room. "Take her." Before she could react, two other aliens moved swiftly toward her, their hands extending in her direction. In a moment of panic, the medic's mind raced. She had no weapon, no way to defend herself, not against these beings who were so much more powerful than her. But then, as if by instinct, she felt the device in her pocket pulse with energy. Without thinking, she pulled it out and held it up. The device glowed brighter, a blue light surging through the room. The aliens froze, their eyes widening in shock. The medic's grip tightened on the device, and she could feel its power, its hidden potential, coursing through her. This was no ordinary tool. It was a key. And in this moment, it was the only thing that stood between her and whatever dark fate awaited her. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice filled with newfound authority. For the first time since her imprisonment, she felt in control. The room grew eerily silent. The aliens, once so confident in their power, hesitated, unsure of what to do next. The medic's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her hand steady, knowing that her next move would determine everything. The unknown path was now in her hands. The medic stood in the center of the alien command room, her body tense, her fingers gripping the mysterious device as it pulsed with energy. The room was heavy with silence, broken only by the soft hum of the alien technology around her. The towering figures of the aliens stared at her, their once confident demeanor now replaced with a mix of wariness and disbelief. She had done the unthinkable. She had turned the tables on them. But now, as she stood there, facing what could be the last moment of her life, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. The device, which had seemed like a lifeline moments ago, now felt like both a weapon and a curse. It was a symbol of power, yes, but also of the unknown. What exactly had she unleashed? Was she truly in control, or was she just a pawn in a game far bigger than she could comprehend? Her mind raced, but her eyes never left the aliens in front of her. There was one in particular, the same alien who had first approached her in the cell. Its eyes glowed with a strange intensity, and for the first time since their encounter, it spoke again, this time in a tone that seemed almost familiar. "Do you think this is over?" it asked, its voice low and ominous. "Do you truly believe you can stand against us?" The medic didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. She had seen too much, fought too hard, and lost too many to allow herself to be intimidated now. "I don't know what you are," she said, her voice steady, "but I know who I am, and I won't let you control me." The alien chuckled, a sound that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, human," it sneered. "This ship, this power, it's not something you can understand. It's not something you can control. You're not the first to try." The medic's mind flashed back to the dark, cold cell. to the hours she had spent trapped, alone, wondering if anyone would ever come for her. And yet here she was. The device in her hand was her answer. She was proof that even the most unexpected things could change the course of history. She wasn't just a prisoner anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. "I may not understand it," she replied, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "But I'll make sure you never get the chance to use it against anyone else." For a long moment, the room was still. The alien's glowing eyes studied her, as if weighing her words. The medic's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground. She was ready for whatever came next, even if she had no idea what that would be. Then, without warning, the alien reached out with one long, slender hand and extended its fingers toward her. It was a move she had seen before, but this time it felt different. It was as if the very air around her had changed, thickened, charged with some unseen force. She reacted instinctively. She raised the device, and as she did, it flared to life with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. A pulse of blue light shot from it, striking the alien's outstretched hand and forcing it back. The alien's expression shifted from one of smug confidence to one of shock and pain. It stumbled, its arm twitching involuntarily, as if the very energy of the device was disrupting its control. The medic didn't wait. She bolted forward, using the brief moment of confusion to her advantage. She knew she had no time to waste. This was her chance. The device pulsed again, this time with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. It was as if it was guiding her, leading her through the maze of the command center. Her eyes darted to the various panels lining the walls, each one displaying alien symbols she couldn't understand. But she didn't need to understand them. She could feel the power, feel it building within her, pushing her forward. Behind her, the aliens were recovering, their footsteps echoing in the hall. The medic's pulse quickened, but she didn't look back. She had one goal now: to reach the ship's core, to understand what the device truly was, and to stop the aliens from using it for their own dark purposes. She moved swiftly, her mind focused on the mission. She didn't know how much time she had before they caught up to her, but she couldn't afford to think about that. The unknown was terrifying, but it was also her greatest weapon. She had already survived worse, and she wouldn't let herself fall now. As she approached the central chamber of the ship, the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy, like the heart of the vessel itself was alive. The air grew colder, and the familiar hum of the ship's engines grew louder, almost deafening. She could feel the weight of the moment. This was it, the final stand. The aliens would not give up easily, but neither would she. In the final moments before she made her move, she whispered to herself, a quiet promise that only she could hear: "This is not over." And with that, she stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next.